We're on episode 13 of the Disruptive Love Podcast. I'm Jonathan Bennett.
And I'm David Bennett.
Our goal is to positively disrupt love and dating and relationships. So please join us by subscribing to our podcast. You can find it at disruptive.love and by following us on Twitter and Facebook at disruptivelove, one word. Also, we want to thank Joshua Wagner. He's our producer, and he makes everything look great. We are really happy today to have a special guest, Ersilia Pompilio, writer, blogger, storyteller, producer. She hosts her own podcast. She's multi-talented, so it's called Nurses and Hypochondriacs. And she also blogs at NotoriouslySingleGirl.com. And you can find her on Twitter at on Twitter and Instagram at Notoriously Single Girl. A lot of people, we want to start by asking you about your name. When I first saw that, I was very fascinated. I know people who are single and loving it, they're hopelessly single, and other variations, but I've never seen Notoriously Single. So we're very interested in learning why you picked the name Notoriously Single.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on the show. I know I got asked to be on the show, but I'm thankful for being here. I love what you guys are doing. This is awesome. I love it from the male's perspective and with the female's perspective as well. And yeah, so Notoriously Single Girl, the way it started, I wasn't always notoriously single. I was in a committed relationship from the age of 18 to 26. I then got married to that person, that man. And we were married for less than a year, and we found out we just hated each other. And so we, got a divorce and split paths. And all of a sudden, I found myself single. I felt very, very lost because in that pivotal part of my growing up, kind of from later adolescence to my early adulthood, I had been dating one person who I thought I was going to end up with for the rest of my life, and all of a sudden I was single and I didn't know what to do. And I just kind of dealt with it, and I would go to parties and people would always ask me, are you still single? As if I was just all of a sudden get someone else. Okay, that one's done, now let me replace him and get someone else. And it kind of got to be annoying because my friends would see me. They didn't like the fact that I was getting divorced. We were in a huge group of friends who had all gotten married around the same time. And, we were all setting up households, and I was the only one that was getting a divorce, and they were freaked out. Like, I was that, I guess, insurgent person, the person who was not following the pack. And they didn't know how to deal with me. They thought that divorce was going to be contagious, and we kind of split paths from each other. And like I said, everywhere I would go, I would see married people, and they would ask me that question: so you're still single? And I was like, yeah, well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with being single? And I started on this very long journey of about 17 years of learning about myself and being okay with being single, because I wasn't okay with it. And it took me a long time to be comfortable with myself. And like I said, I did a lot of exploration, self-exploration. I took a ton of classes of different kinds just to find out who I was as a person and what my identity was. So I started writing in 2008, and I had always wanted to start a blog. And I thought Notoriously Single Girl was a great idea for a name. And I was watching, how it came to me was I was watching the story of Notorious B.I.G.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was like, that's it. I got the download, and I was like, Notoriously Single Girl, And in my self-exploration, like I said, I took lots of classes. I am the godmother of dating sites. I was there from the beginning. I remember when Match.com was just Match, like striking a match. And I was on that site in 2003. And I watched a lot of Sex and the City, which is a terrible dating thing to watch. But yeah, so that's the story.
It's kind of funny you mentioned the whole thing about being single, because I was actually, just this afternoon, a reporter from Business Insider was asking about some politicians who are single and how that might impact their political career. And I was doing some research on singleness, and it's kind of crazy the way society perceives single people.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy. It's just that they perceive them as less warm, less loving. The the descriptors to describe single people are, the highest ones were like lonely, shy, insecure, whereas married people, it was loving, secure, confident. But there's other research that shows that single people are none of those things. Like single people are just as happy, just as secure, just as outgoing as people in relationships. But it's funny that you saw that, because it does seem like when you're single, and even if you want to be single, people just assume that you must be the most miserable person on the planet.
Oh yeah, I get that all the time. Oh my God, don't you want to be with someone? Are you okay? I used to get that before a lot, but I changed my circle of friends to where I don't have any close married friends. And the married friends that I do have, they get me, and stuff. But the married friends I had before really envied me. I'm going to go back to your topic of research on the politicians. So they also mentioned that majority of politicians are narcissists and cheat on their wives, and they're really showing a facade. It's all fake. I mean, look at our politicians now. It's like you got the Bill Clinton, and it's like, yeah, we just glossed over that whole Monica Lewinsky thing, and then his wife ran for office, and then now we have Donald Trump, and it's like, oh no, let's not look at all those things. Yes, I'm in a pretend happy relationship. Like, it's all pretend, it's all fake, and they're making single people look to be bad people, because after the 1920s, like after the World War II, I don't even know when World War II ended anyway, I'm like bad historian there, but the whole concept of getting people together as a couple was really to sell homes, to sell cars, to sell cookware,
Well, I like how you mentioned the
if
facade.
you really look at that. So.
Well, the facade too. It's not just politicians. I mean, you go on on social media of married couples, for example. I mean, you see these perfect pictures, like, oh, we went out and we took this great selfie. You don't see how afterwards, he might have he didn't order dessert or didn't ask the right thing, and she's like yelling at him, or she's upset because he's doing something really stupid and he's upset because of this. I mean, I think social media has made that
barfed everywhere, or the kids barfed everywhere, and the house is really a mess. Yes. And you only see that happy picture. You don't see the reality and stuff. So
and popular culture, especially in the in the English-speaking languages, presents being coupled up as like the best thing you could be. I mean, you don't see any shows where the girl dumps this guy who she was settling with for years, and now the happy ending is she lives happily single. Yeah. I mean, it's always she meets a guy and that solves her problems, or her whole life she was struggling with relationships, but now she met her soulmate. I mean, all of our media says if you want to be happy, you find that person. I mean, there's nothing in there that says if you want to be happy, you're single.
Exactly. It's find that connection within yourself and find that grounding on what it is that you're really supposed to be doing. I mean, having a family and having a home and having that high-powered job is not for everyone. It's very, very stressful. It's exhausting, And I think that society is selling that to you because, again, it's economics. It's money for everybody. It sells things. It makes the world go around. It pays taxes. But in reality, it's like you're like, do I really want to do this? And stuff. So, yeah.
We really like your perspective, as you can see. We are big on love and relationships and dating. I mean, that is what we do. Yeah. But I think I know that we also recognize, as dating coaches and doing this podcast, that the best way to be successful about dating and in a relationship is to actually not settle and not rush into it under pressure.
I agree.
Yeah. So we want to ask you a little bit about your dating experience. What dating apps, in your opinion, have the best guys and the worst guys?
Well, I think nowadays all the guys are on all the apps, and you have a lot of the same people. I mean, I remember when Tinder came out, and Tinder was supposed to be a makeshift of Grindr. And if anybody doesn't know what Grindr is, it first hit the gay population, and it was a way for men to hook up, really, and date. But most of them would just hook up. I mean, the app would tell you, oh, this guy is 2 feet away from you. And I have a lot of gay friends, and I remember when Grindr was out, and they would show me, and it was almost like a game, and it was really funny. and they're like, look, this guy's like 5 feet away from me. And so it was that thing. So Tinder went ahead and made their own version, which wasn't exactly like that, because I think it would be a bit stalkerish in the female sector. It doesn't really work that well. And so then it became known as just a hookup app. And then Bumble came about from the female that had started, was in the Tinder group. So she started Bumble. And so the chatter was, oh yes, Bumble has the more sophisticated men. And those guys, they don't lie. And they're really executives and CEOs and producers. Well, go figure, they're all lying. And they're the same ones that are on Tinder nowadays. So everybody's on all the apps. I don't think one app is better than the other. So yeah, I mean, I could even go a step further, and I had a psychologist, Dr. Ramani Duversala, who is a narcissist expert. She wrote a book called Should I Stay or Should I Go? On narcissism, and she's excellent. Her book is so excellent, and she says that, she's like, no one's going to find someone on an app because it's all about a picture. It's all superficial. And yeah, people, they'll hook up or whatever, but she said she's never heard of anybody really getting together on an app, and I've never really heard of like people staying together. Maybe there's that one or two out there, but usually I don't hear people like, oh yeah, I met this guy on an app and now we're getting married and it's so great. And you don't hear that. So
yeah, it's so weird that the stats, even the research on it shows it doesn't really lead to long-lasting relationships. It doesn't usually lead to relationships ever. I think like 70% of Tinder users don't even go out on a date from the app. So I mean, what's the point of being on there or even having the app if it's not really meeting any of these goals?
Boredom. It's boredom.
I think it is. Boredom is one of the top answers, believe it or not, in surveys. Yeah. We're big on horror stories in this on this podcast because, and online dating has so many horror stories, and it goes back to kind of the definition of insanity. It's like doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I mean, but I think so many people feel hooked into these apps that they don't see any alternatives.
Right.
But, I mean, when I asked you this question when we shared our doc, it was funny because you came up. We could probably do a 2-hour-long podcast with your horror story.
Oh yeah, I'm a huge storyteller. This is how I got into writing Notoriously Single Girl, which I forgot to mention in the beginning. Is I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner in my real life day job, and I used to work at this children's hospital, and all these nurses used to stop by my unit to hear my stories, or like, do you got another dating story? And even I went to go get my hair done yesterday, and my hairdresser was like, okay, got any stories? That was her first question. What are the stories? People want to hear that.
Why don't you share a couple of your better ones with us? I mean, I know that you have so many great ones.
Yeah. Well, I'll share the one that these are a couple of recent ones. One is a short one that I went on this weekend, and it was on Bumble, and this guy automatically said, he goes, hey, where are we going on our honeymoon? And I thought that was funny, and I was bored because I was stuck in the desert working. So I was like, let's go to Bali, So usually I don't engage in stuff like that because I'm just like, oh, it's kind of stupid. It's very love bomb. I know that's not my thing. So, but I was bored, so I engaged, and he had great pictures, and he said he was 48, and he was an ex-tennis pro, and and he used to do triathlon, and it was all a great profile, and he was 6'1", and he was very fit and handsome. And I was like, he kept asking me out, and I didn't really want to put in too much effort. So, to do my hair or my nails, and I happened to be at the library doing some writing. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll meet you. And he's like, let's have a margarita. And so I met him, and I looked at him, and the first question I asked was like, how old are you? And he was like, why? And
we know where this is going.
Yes. He goes, how old do I look? And I'm like, mid-50s. And I go, how old are you really? He's like, 61.
Oh, man.
I mean, I'm 45, but, and then he said, well, I really like women in their 40s, and they won't go out with me if I tell them my real age. The date turned into a date consultation type thing, a mentoring thing. And then my other one, so that was just kind of a funny one.
So you didn't go on a second date, I'm guessing.
No,
Okay,
I mean, and of course he asked for sex because that's just what he wanted. He said it's been like 4 months since he's been on Bumble and he hasn't gotten in very many good hits. So,
oh my gosh.
It's like, so right away with the sex. So then the other date I went on, I knew this guy, and I'm very intuitive, and I can almost tell from a picture that either someone has dark energy or they're just, either just wanting sex or something's not right. So this one guy, we had been communicating. I had actually seen him on the bike path. We have a bike path here in Burbank, and I had passed him by one time, and I was like, oh, this guy looks familiar. And yes, he walks on the bike path. He lives in my neighborhood. And so we connected. And again, I was like feeling, I think I should make this a very, very casual date, like no alcohol involved. And so I said, let's go on a walking date. And he was like, yeah, let's go on a walking date. That's perfect. So we went on a walking date, and right away, because he knew I was a storyteller and he'd listened to a lot of my podcasts, he started out with a story. And I always pay attention to people's stories because they're so important, because it shows a lot of who they are and where they're coming from. And he starts out with saying that his, he had moved in with his ex-girlfriend, and they had an open relationship, and the ex-girlfriend was dating another woman. And so one day, the ex-girlfriend, who was his girlfriend at the time, had moved in, and then all of a sudden she asked that the girlfriend move in. So the girlfriend ended up moving in with them. And one day he comes home and finds them in bed together, and they asked him to jump in, so he jumps in. And then he tells me that after he had sex with the second woman, the girlfriend's girlfriend, that she became transgender. So he's like, oh no, do I turn women into transgender? And so this was a huge turning point. I was like, oh, this is an interesting story. I don't know where this is gonna go. So our walk was like almost a 4-mile walk, but it was interesting conversation. And like I said, I like stories, and I like people, and I like to figure out people. And, he asked me on a second date, which I was fine. Now, we had this whole conversation about high heels because, again, the psychologist that was on my show, Dr. Ramani, had said, anytime a man asks you to wear high heels, you should say no.
Interesting.
And it's all the philosophy of the woman needs to want to wear the high heels, because then it's like this man is setting the standard and you need to live by that standard. It's a very narcissistic principle instead of it being equal, right? So he was like, I don't believe in that. I think I should ask a woman if I want them to wear heels. I go, yes, but you're not understanding the principle. It's like, I do like to wear high heels, and that's fine, but I'm not going to wear them every day. So, so, we ended the date. He asked for a second date, and he was texting me, and I had texted him like, oh, thanks for the date. It was really nice. We had gotten along, and we had a good conversation, and we had stuff in common. And so he, again, brought up the high heel thing. He was like, hey, when we go out to dinner, I want you to wear high heels. It's very important. So I asked him on the text, I was like, well, what is the woman that you're with now wearing? And he's like, oh, my ex-girlfriend. He's like, we're at the mall having lunch, and she's wearing tennis shoes, but she wears high heels when she goes to the club. And I was like, what?
Oh, man.
So I said, hey, it was nice knowing you. I just can't deal with this thing, because he had another ex-girlfriend that he was friends with that he had a standing date with. Like every Wednesday they got together. And I was just like, I can't deal with this. I mean, you have 2 women. Where do I fit in? It's like, I don't want to be the third sister wife. I mean, I didn't tell him that. I very politely said, this is not for me. I just can't deal with that, and I took to Twitter, and I asked my single Twitter people this question, how they would deal with it, before I knew what he was going to say next, what they felt about men having female friends, but this is a different context. So and he said, oh, I knew that you and I would never date or get or connect in a romantic way. He's like, but I didn't think it would have been because of the other women. He's like, I thought it would be because I'm a swinger. And I did not respond. It was like, whoa.
Oh man, I mean, the internet, I think, has opened up the world to you can meet everybody and anybody. And that reminds me, not in terms of this level, that was kind of next level horror stories, the ones you told, but I know just from what I've learned about you, and I know, and from what even though I didn't know you were a pediatric nurse practitioner, I mean, that's awesome. Do you find that a lot of simply the guys just don't measure up to, you've done so much, you've had a lot of success, and maybe you're dealing with guys whose idea of ambition is, moving out of their mom's basement or something?
Well, I've looked at that, and it's an interesting point that you bring up. I think that I think I've gotten men in the past who have been intimidated by me or don't get me because I do so much. And they're like, why can't you just be a nurse practitioner and work in the hospital and like have that 9-to-5 job? Or I'll get an artist who doesn't have that, and they're very to the left, and they don't care about where they live. I mean, they could be living in a box and they're fine with that. And so it's been difficult to find someone that has that balance, that, is still a professional, but still has a really great creative side and understands like the entrepreneurial mindset as well. So that has been difficult for me, but I've dated all kinds of men. I remember probably when I was around 35, I dated a guy who was 10 years younger than me, and I was doing very, very well at that time. I was teaching, I had my job, I was doing like triathlon, I was in my greatest shape, and he only made $10 an hour, and I was fine with that, and I would always tease him and tell him I was his sugar mama, but he didn't like that very much. And he was also from another country, so he didn't understand. He was new here. He had only been here a year. And so he just didn't get that. I was like, just enjoy it. It's never going to happen. It's probably never going to happen to you again. Like, let's just have fun and like, and we'd go hiking together. We do a lot of very physical activities together, like bike riding and stuff like that. So yeah, I personally now don't have a problem with it anymore. I mean, I feel secure in myself, but that other man has to feel secure, because in your guys, I mean, do you get intimidated when a woman makes more money? And, does that happen to you? Do you get intimidated?
Well, I mean, I personally don't. I mean, he and I don't really care. We're all about like disruption and that kind of thing. But, a lot of people we know would have a very hard time with that. They would, a lot of our clients, I think, would have an issue with that.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've encountered men that have had issues with that. I'm a homeowner as well, and that is, and I drive a BMW. Oh my gosh, ever since I got my BMW, that was like cock blocker. Huge. So,
well, a lot of the guys we know wouldn't even object to it like ideologically. It's not like, oh, I'm thinking traditionally I cannot do this. It's just more that it kind of eats at them and they just can't handle it. So it's very interesting how that affects some guys. They say, hey, I'm all in favor of this, I don't care, but then over time it becomes a problem. Yeah,
it's an ego thing. It's definitely an ego thing. Yeah.
The very timely, you had brought this up, and I thought this was a great thing to address, but the whole Me Too movement, very timely. And I know we've noticed a few differences in giving dating advice and some of the way things have changed. What have you seen about how Me Too has impacted dating? Like if guys have behaved differently towards you?
I was just talking about this with my friend Chris last night. He's a straight man, and he's about 53, 51, 52. He's my co-producer for my storytelling shows. And, he said that he thinks, because I thought it was just a lot more sleaze. I thought that I've been asked to, like, even over the app, like, hey, let's just hook up, or let's just have sex, or even on the first date, like, hey, let's just hook up and have sex. It felt like it's just over and over and over again. Like, no men on there want to have a relationship, and either it's the app thing. And so I had seen a video with Patty Sanger, and I had kind of mentioned it to you guys, and this was just recent, within the last couple of days that it was recorded, and she was saying that men on the apps are don't know how to pursue women, and women are not getting pursued as much, and they're not getting asked out on dates as much. And it's because the Me Too movement has made them more docile, and they don't know how to approach a woman or how to wine and dine them. And she suggested that they watch old movies, which is not what you should do. Don't do that. The rom-coms that are what created the whole problem. So my aspect is, I feel like I said the guys have gotten sleazy, and my friend Chris had added, which I thought was very intelligent through his perspective, was the sleazy guys, yes, have gotten sleazy, and the guys who were shy have gotten more shy. And I thought that was a very interesting perspective. So I don't know, what have you guys seen on your end?
Ours has kind of been along those lines, exactly. That we give what we call a jerk talk in the Columbus area every now and then, where we kind of give tips to spot a jerk. And we always say that, you know, things on online dating, when you say no creeps, you know, I'm not here to hook up and all this stuff. You're
attracting them.
The good guys are like, oh, maybe that's me. I shouldn't do anything. But the creeps are like, well, that's not me. I'm not like that. I'm not a jerk.
You can't be talking about me, or this just sounds like a challenge to me.
Yeah.
What, you know, like
so all the idiots and the creeps and the jerks just keep on doing what they've been doing, whereas the good guys just get even more timid and more shy.
Right.
What you know your friend told you is exactly what we've noticed as well. It just kind of takes the guys who are appropriate, are good, are moral, and they get more timid, whereas the jerks just get more empowered. Because nothing's going to stop them.
Yeah, and I've even felt it. Like, this one guy asked me for my number, and it was about 9 o'clock in the morning, and he goes and calls me. And I had connected with him several times before, and he lives in my area. And he just called me to ask what color my panties were. And he's like 40. He's 42.
Well, I'm amazed how many guys
at 9 a.m.
How many guys will just open with? Because I don't see it personally, but I see it like on screenshots on different, you know, humor sites and stuff. They just open with something sexual almost right away. Have you noticed that at all?
Oh yeah, all the time. And I delete them immediately. It's the love bomb. I'm getting ready to write a blog about the love bomb. It amazes me how not so many women know about it. I can't, probably it's been about 2 years now that I started to really hone in on what that is and what that was. And I no longer am, I've retrained my brain, because I mean, I think women are just so trained to go, hi, beautiful. Oh, he called me beautiful. Oh, yes, I'm going to respond. Oh my God, he called me sexy. Oh, yes, I'm going to respond. You know, and I think women are just trained on that. And I've retrained my brain to get repulsed by that. You know, and so now it repulses me, and I just delete that person, you know, and no matter who they are, because it's just gonna trickle down. And it's best to always just start with a nice conversation, like, hi, how's your day going? Oh, my day's going good. Like, very boring. So if you want anything, I mean, that's what I go for now, is very boring. And the sleazeballs, unless I'm super bored, I do not engage, and I just delete.
Yeah, I don't understand that whole, hey, sexy, hey, beautiful.
Well, I think it's the internet. We've talked about this a lot, too, that, you know, if a guy walked up to you in a bar and said, you know, what kind of panties are you wearing? The bouncer would probably throw him out. You know, if a guy, I mean, we always use the classic extreme example, but if a guy walked into a bar and pulled down his pants and showed a woman his junk, he would be arrested and considered a sex offender. But yet online, a lot of these guys who would never do anything like that in person will just lead with these junk pics. I mean, I think the internet has just the anonymity and the hiding behind the screen has just really empowered a lot of really crappy behavior.
Yeah, I agree, and it's really sad, and I feel it's sad for the men. You know, I call myself an equalist. People think that I'm a feminist, and I'm not. I'm an equalist. I'm really behind the men, and I don't think men know what to even do anymore. They're so confused, you know, and I don't think women know how to respond. They're so confused. I was speaking to a woman last night who was very interesting. She studies like neuroplasticity and how the brain works, and she's studying now the reverse chivalry. Okay, like instead of the man opening up the doors and doing all those chivalrous things that we were taught were good, it's more about catching people's social cues and understanding a woman's social cues instead of doing those physical things for them. And it's more on an emotional basis, which I said, good luck with that, because anybody on the spectrum, that's like one of their difficult things, because their frontal lobe cannot pick that up. So, but it's an interesting aspect because of the women, because women, I mean, she's like, well, women can open up their own door. Why are we still doing that? And I go, that's a pretty good point. Instead of women, really, what have they always wanted? It's like, understand my emotions, where the man's like, oh, no, women are so emotional. Like, I can't understand emotions, when men are actually emotional too. They're, a very evolved man understands their emotions, and what isn't, men committing suicide is very high as well. I don't know the statistics on that, but yeah, and why? Because they've been taught to be aggressive, be the man, don't show your emotions, boys don't cry, so.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, like, a lot of men don't know what to do, because I think our view is kind of, don't attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity. And I think that for a lot of guys, it really is, they don't know what to do maybe. They might be sending the dick pic because they actually did a reporter did a went on Bumble and said, you know what, these guys are sending me all these dick pics. I'm going to send them vagina pics. You
yeah, I've heard.
And what's funny is every response she got was, oh, thanks, this is so cool. I really appreciate you doing this. Like, every guy, like, I think 34 out of 35, were very thankful she sent that picture. So what we realize is a lot of guys probably think, I would love to get a pic like this, so I'm going to open with this pic. And of course, for women, we know with women it has probably a 0% success rate when you open with the dick pic. But so a lot of guys just don't know. I mean, they may want to receive an equivalent pic like that, so they do it.
Well, I was just going to say that I would like to have you on this podcast again to discuss that very topic about the cluelessness and how that guys just don't really know how to even respond these days, or how to even initiate. Because I think that's what a lot of the frustration comes down to, frustration for men and women.
Yeah, like the 61-year-old, he was telling me he was very frustrated. He's like, all these women want is that they want me to pay for their dinners, and that's all I'm going out for them for. And I go, yeah, pretty much. That kind of sometimes happens. Yeah. And I was guilty of doing that very early on myself when I started dating. I mean, that's why I'm writing a book right now called Girls Gotta Eat, and it's all about dating and food. And how I all through grad school, it's what I had free meals, like almost every night, but it's all about what you want to do and stuff. And I think, it's like this 61-year-old man, I mean, he was married for 35 years and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to date, and he asked me, he's like, how, even the way he dressed, he was like, I always wear a t-shirt and jeans. And I go, and do the women come all dressed up? He's like, yeah. And I go, exactly, because they're going out. They are making an impression. Yeah. They're doing hair. They're doing the nails. It's expensive, to get your hair done and your nails done and your makeup. It takes time. When I had met him, I had been in the library for 5 or 6 hours. I didn't redo my makeup. I just added lipstick, and I had a little dress on and tennis shoes. And I told him, I go, listen, I'm wearing a very casual dress and tennis shoes. He's like, that's fine. I'm casual too. And I go, you need to tell the woman this is a casual date, so she knows what to dress. Either you lead the way or sometimes I lead the way.
We want to wrap up by asking you, what would it take to make the notoriously single girl notoriously in a relationship?
People wonder about that. They're like, are you going to be notoriously single forever? And I go, first of all, number one, it's a brand. And my intention was never to, when I started that blog, was never to be notoriously single forever. I really believe we are human beings. We need each other in order to progress and to thrive, in order to go on living, and growing. And we need people. That's what we're all about. That's what our genetic makeup is about. Yes, I am looking for a mate. And basically, like I had written you guys in the story of what I had said, I'm looking for the yin to my yang. I'm looking for the, there's no perfect people out there, but I am looking for my partner, someone who's into what I'm into, who has like an entrepreneurial spirit, who is creative, who is pretty business-minded, and is very connected with themselves and knows themselves and can be okay with themselves and having a conversation about things, especially if they're bothered. and being outgoing. And I had mentioned there's a couple, like we talked about those couples that we love on Instagram, and there's a couple that I follow, and they're a fashion couple, Trina Turk and Mr. Turk, and I, love them. They're a funky couple, and they're a fashion designing couple, and they help each other with their business. And basically, I was telling this architect that I had gone out with, because he asked me what I wanted, and I was like, I want someone to be my Mr. Turk, to add to that so that we can thrive together, either in business and also in relationship and stuff. I sent him the picture, and he's like, yeah, they look snazzy. He's like, I'd want to be with them or meet them or whatever. And so a couple days after I had this date with this guy, who happened to be an architect with a handlebar mustache, so he was very creative looking himself, I found myself in Pasadena, and I was supposed to record a podcast, and I was very confused on why I was there, because my podcast host canceled, and I was trying to get a workspace to record the podcast. It just wasn't working. So I was in the middle of this street, and I see this guy, and he's wearing these swanky pants, and he's carrying a lamp, and he's wearing these funky glasses, and I was like, I know that guy. And so I started following him, and I realized who he was. He was Mr. Turk.
Oh, wow. That is so cool.
I had manifested Mr. Turk, and he was there doing a photo shoot in the park of his line, so of his men's line, and also I think some of the women's line there was too. But I was like, oh my gosh, and I always talk to them on Instagram and everything. So, and I've sent them a few of my blogs that I've written about their line. But yeah, so it was pretty. I was like, okay, the universe, not Mr. Turk particularly, someone like him. So yeah, it was pretty wild. So. And then I sent the picture to the guy, and he was like, you're such a stalker. I was like, like I knew this guy was going to be in Pasadena for all the... It was just bizarre. It was wild.
That is awesome. Well, we're out of time, but I want to thank you so much for coming on. This was a great discussion.
Yes.
I had a lot of fun. It's always good to hear those different perspectives and the horror stories.
Yes, we love the horror
stories. We're all about that. Those are very entertaining. Before we go, why don't you tell us a little bit again about where people can find you, what you do, so they can, and we'll put those in the notes on the podcast as well, so people can click on them.
Sure. So my podcast is Nurses and Hypochondriacs, and that's on iTunes and Podbean. I have Notoriously Single Girl is my blog, and that's on WordPress, www.notoriouslysinglegirl.com. Also, I'm on Instagram as Notoriously Single Girl, and Twitter as Notoriously Single as well.
All right, awesome.
Excellent.
So thanks again for joining us, and thank you to everyone for viewing, and we will see you next week.
Thanks.